Maya Johnson adjusted her worn apron and glanced at the clock on the kitchen wall of Rosie's diner. The afternoon rush had died down, leaving only the familiar hum of the old refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic from the busy street outside. She had been working at this small neighborhood diner for 3 years now, ever since she moved to the city with her 8-year-old daughter, Zara, hoping for a fresh start after her divorce. The diner wasn't much to look at. The red vinyl booths had seen better days, some sporting patches of duct tape over tiers that had grown too large to ignore. The black and white checkered floor tiles were chipped in places, and the neon sign outside flickered intermittently, casting an uncertain glow over the sidewalk. But it was honest work, and Maya had learned to find beauty in the simple routines of serving coffee, taking orders, and listening to the stories of the regulars who treated the place like their second home. It was on a particularly gray Tuesday afternoon when she first noticed him. An elderly white man, probably in his late 70s, sat alone in the corner booth near the window. His clothes were clean but dated, a simple button-down shirt, and slacks that had clearly seen many years of wear. His shoes were polished but old-fashioned, the kind that spoke of a time when people dressed more formally for everyday occasions. What struck Maya most was not his appearance, but the profound loneliness that seemed to emanate from him like a visible aura. He sat perfectly still, his weathered hands folded on the table, staring out the window with eyes that held decades of stories. When she approached his table with the coffee pot, he looked up with a gentle smile that transformed his entire face. "Good afternoon," Maya said warmly, her natural compassion immediately drawn to this solitary figure. "Can I start you off with some coffee?" "That would be very kind. Thank you," he replied, his voice carrying the refined cadence of someone who had once been accustomed to more formal settings. "I'm Walter, by the way. Walter Pemberton. Nice to meet you, Mr. Pemberton." "I'm Maya." She poured the steaming coffee into his cup, noticing how his hands trembled slightly as he reached for it. "Are you new to the neighborhood?" Walter's eyes lit up at her friendly inquiry. "Actually, I've lived here for about 6 months now. I'm still getting used to the area. This seemed like a nice, quiet place for lunch." Maya glanced around the nearly empty diner. "Well, you'll find it plenty quiet, especially in the afternoons. Are you ready to order, or would you like a few more minutes to look at the menu?" Walter studied the laminated menu with the concentration of someone who hadn't had many choices lately. "What would you recommend? I'm not very familiar with places like this." There was something in his tone that suggested this type of casual dining was new to him, though he wasn't complaining. Maya sensed a story there, a transition from one kind of life to another. "The meatloaf is really good today, and it comes with mashed potatoes and green beans. It's comfort food, nothing fancy, but it's made with love." "That sounds perfect," Walter said, closing the menu with a decisive nod. "And thank you for the recommendation. It's been a while since someone has." He paused, seeming to catch himself before revealing too much. "Well, thank you." As Maya walked back to the kitchen to place his order, she found herself wondering about Walter's story. There was something about him that didn't quite fit the typical profile of their usual customers. His mannerisms were refined, almost aristocratic, yet he seemed genuinely grateful for the simple kindness of a recommendation. His clothes, while old, were of good quality, and he wore a simple gold watch that looked expensive despite its understated design. When she brought his meal, Walter's face brightened with genuine appreciation. "This looks wonderful," he said, and she could tell he meant it. "I don't suppose you have time to chat for a moment? It's been quite a while since I've had a proper conversation." Maya glanced around the diner. The only other customer was Harold, a regular who came in every Tuesday for pie and coffee and never needed anything until he was ready for his check. "I suppose I could sit for a minute," she said, sliding into the booth across from Walter. "Tell me about yourself," Walter said, cutting into his meatloaf with the careful precision of someone who had been taught proper table manners. "Do you have family?" Maya smiled, her face automatically lighting up when she thought of her daughter. "I have a daughter, Zara. She's 8 and absolutely the light of my life. She's in school now, but she'll be here around 4 to do her homework at that corner table. This job works well because the owner, Mrs. Rodriguez, doesn't mind her being here after school." "A daughter," Walter repeated, his eyes growing wistful. "That must be wonderful. Children bring such joy to a home." Something in his voice made Maya study his face more carefully. Do you have children, Mr. Pemberton? Walter paused with his fork halfway to his mouth, and, for a moment, Maya saw a flash of pain cross his features. I had a son, he said quietly. We became estranged many years ago. I made some mistakes as a father, I'm afraid. Put work before family, didn't listen when I should have. By the time I realized what I had lost, it was too late. I'm sorry, Maya said gently. That must be very difficult. It is, Walter acknowledged. Especially now that I have so much time to think about it. I retired recently, you see, and suddenly, I find myself with all the time in the world and no one to share it with. It's quite an adjustment. Maya felt her heart go out to this lonely old man. She recognized the signs of someone who had lost their sense of purpose along with their connections to family. Well, she said impulsively, you're welcome here anytime. We may not be much to look at, but we're friendly. Walter's smile was radiant. You have no idea how much that means to me, my dear. Truly. From that day forward, Walter became a regular fixture at Rosie's diner. He would arrive every Tuesday and Thursday at exactly 2:30 in the afternoon, always taking the same corner booth by the window. Maya learned that he lived in a small apartment just a few blocks away, having downsized dramatically after his retirement. He never spoke in detail about his previous life, but little clues suggested it had been quite different from his current circumstances. He mentioned having traveled extensively for business, spoke knowledgeably about fine art and classical music, and occasionally referenced experiences that suggested he had once moved in very different social circles. Yet he never acted superior or out of place in the humble diner. Instead, he seemed genuinely grateful for the simple pleasure of human company and a good meal. Maya found herself looking forward to Walter's visits. He was unfailingly polite and interested in her life, asking about Zara's progress in school and listening with genuine attention to Maya's stories about the challenges and joys of single motherhood. In return, he shared carefully edited stories from his past, always steering away from specifics about his work or the reasons for his estrangement from his son. I was in the technology industry, he would say vaguely when asked about his career. Very demanding work, required a lot of travel and long hours. Not conducive to family life, I'm afraid. When Zara started joining Maya at the diner after school, Walter's entire demeanor would transform. The lonely old man would disappear, replaced by someone who clearly adored children and had a natural gift for relating to them. He would help Zara with her math homework, his patient explanations making complex concepts seem simple and fun. Mr. Walter is really smart, Mama, Zara would tell Maya later. He knows everything about numbers and computers. He said he used to work with people who made the games on my tablet. Walter had carefully avoided mentioning exactly what role he had played in the technology industry, but his knowledge was clearly extensive. He could explain complex mathematical concepts in ways that made Zara's eyes light up with understanding, and he seemed to have an intuitive grasp of how to make learning enjoyable for a bright 8-year-old. As the weeks passed, Maya began to think of Walter almost like a grandfather figure for Zara and a dear friend for herself. He never asked for anything beyond the simple pleasure of their company, and he always paid his modest bill with exact change, leaving a generous but not excessive tip that suggested he understood the economics of diner work without wanting to seem condescending. One Thursday afternoon in late October, Maya noticed that Walter seemed more subdued than usual. His usual animated conversation was replaced by long periods of contemplative silence, and he barely touched his usual order of meatloaf and potatoes. Is everything all right, Mr. Walter? Zara asked, looking up from her social studies textbook with the direct concern that only children can manage. You seem sad today. Walter smiled at her, but Maya could see the effort it took. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just thinking about some things from the past. Sometimes memories can make an old man feel a bit melancholy. After Zara returned to her homework, Maya slid into the booth across from Walter. You know, if you ever want to talk about what's bothering you, I'm a pretty good listener. Sometimes it helps to share the burden. Walter looked at her with such gratitude that Maya felt her throat tighten with emotion. You're very kind, my dear. I suppose I've been thinking about my son lately. Tomorrow would have been his birthday. He would be 45 now, a successful man with his own life and probably his own family. I wonder sometimes if he ever thinks of his old father, or if I've been completely forgotten. I'm sure he thinks about you, Maya said softly. Children don't forget their parents, even when they're angry or hurt. Maybe it's not too late to reach out. Walter shook his head slowly. I wouldn't even know how to find him. The last I heard, many years ago, he had changed his name and moved across the country. He wanted nothing to do with Walter Pemberton or anything associated with that name. I can't say I blame him. What happened between you two? Maya asked gently, sensing that Walter needed to unburden himself. Walter was quiet for a long time, staring out the window at the afternoon pedestrians hurrying past. I was a workaholic, he finally said, completely consumed by building my career and my company. I missed his baseball games, his school plays, his graduation. I was always promising to be there for the next important event, but there was always another crisis at work, another deal that required my immediate attention. He paused, his voice growing thick with emotion. His mother died when he was 16. Cancer. She fought it for 2 years, and even then, even watching her waste away, I couldn't step back from work long enough to be the father and husband they needed. Michael, my son, he begged me to spend more time at home during her final months. But I was in the middle of a crucial merger, and I thought I was doing it all for them, for their future financial security. Walter's hands trembled as he reached for his coffee cup. She died while I was in a board meeting in Tokyo. Michael called me, crying, and I wasn't there. By the time I got home, he had made all the funeral arrangements himself. He was just 16 years old, and he had to handle everything because his father was too busy making money to be there when it mattered most. Maya felt tears prick her eyes as she listened to Walter's story. She could imagine the pain of that teenage boy, dealing with his mother's death alone while his father was thousands of miles away, focused on business. After the funeral, Walter continued. Michael and I barely spoke. He finished high school, went to college on the East Coast, and gradually cut all ties with me. He legally changed his name when he turned 18, choosing his mother's maiden name instead of mine. The last conversation we had was when he was 22. He told me that he never wanted to see me again, that he was going to build a life that had nothing to do with Walter Pemberton or the technology company that had been more important to me than my own family. That must have been devastating, Maya said quietly. It was, Walter admitted. But I was still so caught up in my work that I told myself he would come around eventually, that he just needed time. I kept thinking that one day he would understand that everything I had done was for him, to give him opportunities and security. I was so arrogant, so sure that I could fix things later when it was more convenient. He laughed bitterly. It took me 20 more years. The weeks following Walter's emotional revelation brought a noticeable change in their friendship. Maya found herself more protective of the elderly man, making sure his favorite booth was always available and checking on him with motherly concern. Walter, having shared his deepest regret, seemed simultaneously lighter and more vulnerable, as if the telling had both freed him and left him emotionally exposed. It was during this period that Maya began to notice small inconsistencies in Walter's story that she hadn't paid attention to before. Despite claiming to live on a modest retirement income, Walter always paid his bill with crisp new $20 bills, never seeming to worry about the cost of his meals or the generous tips he left. His clothes, while simple, bore the subtle hallmarks of expensive tailoring that Maya's ex-husband, who had worked in men's fashion, had taught her to recognize. More puzzling were the occasional slips in Walter's conversation that suggested his former life had been far more significant than he let on. When Zara mentioned a news story about a major technology company's breakthrough in artificial intelligence, Walter had launched into a detailed explanation of the underlying algorithms and business implications that went far beyond casual knowledge. Mr. Walter, Zara had said, her 8-year-old directness cutting through adult politeness. You talk like you used to be in charge of big computer companies, not just working for them. Walter had laughed nervously and changed the subject, but Maya caught the flash of panic in his eyes. She began to wonder who Walter Pemberton really was and why someone with his obvious intelligence and resources was spending his retirement eating meatloaf in a neighborhood diner instead of traveling the world or living in luxury. The mystery deepened one afternoon when Maya overheard Walter on a phone call as she refilled his coffee. He was speaking in hushed tones to someone about quarterly projections and board meetings, using language that suggested ongoing involvement in business affairs rather than the retired lifestyle he claimed. When he noticed Maya listening, Walter quickly ended the call with a curt, "We'll discuss this later," and smiled apologetically. "Sorry about that. My former company still calls occasionally for advice on old projects." Maya nodded politely, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Walter was hiding something significant about his current circumstances. The phone call had sounded more like active management than occasional consultation, and the urgency in Walter's voice suggested real authority rather than emeritus status. Despite her growing curiosity about Walter's background, Maya found herself caring more about his emotional well-being than solving the puzzle of his identity. The lonely old man who helped her daughter with homework and listened to her stories with genuine interest was real, regardless of whatever secrets he might be keeping about his past or present. It was in early November that their relationship took an unexpected turn. Maya had been struggling financially, juggling the diner's modest wages with rising rent prices and Zara's growing needs. The old car she depended on to get to work had been making concerning noises for weeks, and she couldn't afford the repairs the mechanic had quoted. When the car finally broke down completely on a Tuesday morning, Maya found herself stranded with no way to get to work and no money for either repairs or a rental car. She called Mrs. Rodriguez in tears, explaining that she might need to take unpaid leave until she could figure out a solution. Walter arrived at his usual time that afternoon to find Maya missing and another waitress covering his section. When he asked about Maya's absence, the substitute server, clearly overwhelmed and stressed, explained that Maya's car troubles were keeping her from work. "She's such a sweet girl," the young waitress said, juggling multiple orders and clearly struggling to keep up with Maya's usual efficiency. "I hope she can get back soon. We're all worried about her." Walter asked for Maya's address, claiming he wanted to drop off some homework materials for Zara. The waitress, recognizing Walter as one of Maya's favorite customers, didn't hesitate to provide the information. Maya was surprised when she heard the knock on her apartment door that evening. She lived in a modest two-bedroom unit in a building that had seen better days, and unexpected visitors were rare. When she looked through the peephole and saw Walter standing in the hallway holding a small bouquet of flowers, she was both touched and puzzled. "Mr. Walter," she said, opening the door with a smile despite her stress. "What are you doing here?" "I heard about your car troubles," he said gently. "I wanted to check on you and see if there was anything I could do to help." Maya's apartment was clean but sparse, furnished with pieces that were functional rather than decorative. The living room served double duty as Zara's study space, with schoolbooks and art projects spread across a small table. Walter took in the modest surroundings without judgment, his focus entirely on Maya's obvious distress. "That's very kind of you," Maya said, "but there's really nothing anyone can do. The repair estimate is more than I make in a month, and I can't afford to be out of work much longer." Zara appeared from her bedroom, her face lighting up when she saw Walter. "Mr. Walter, are you here for dinner? Mama made spaghetti, but she's been sad all day because our car won't work anymore." "Zara," Maya said gently, "Mr. Walter just stopped by to check on us. He's not staying for dinner." But Walter was already removing his coat, his expression thoughtful. "Actually, if you wouldn't mind the company, I would love to stay for dinner. I haven't had a home-cooked meal in a very long time." Over plates of simple spaghetti with marinara sauce, Walter listened carefully as Maya explained her situation. The car needed a new transmission, the rent was due in 2 weeks, and she was facing the possibility of having to find a new job that didn't require reliable transportation. "I've been thinking about taking a night shift at the hospital cafeteria," Maya said, her voice heavy with exhaustion. "The pay is better, but it would mean leaving Zara with babysitters every evening. I hate the thought of disrupting her routine, but I don't see any other options." Walter was quiet during this explanation, but Maya noticed him studying their living situation with careful attention. He seemed to be taking mental notes about everything from the secondhand furniture to the carefully budgeted grocery items in their kitchen. After dinner, Walter helped Zara with her math homework while Maya did dishes. Watching them together, Maya was struck once again by Walter's natural ease with children and his obvious affection for her daughter. Whatever secrets he might be keeping, His care for them was genuine and deep. When Zara had gone to bed, Walter approached Maya with a serious expression. "I have a proposition," he said carefully. "What if I told you that I could help with your car situation, not as charity, but as an investment?" Maya looked at him skeptically. "What kind of investment?" "You're a remarkable woman, Maya," Walter said. "You're intelligent, hardworking, and you have a gift for making people feel cared for. I've been watching how you handle the customers at the diner, how you manage your daughter's needs, how you've built a life for yourself despite obvious challenges. Those are exactly the qualities that successful people possess." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "What if I were to cover your car repairs and help you get back on your feet, with the understanding that when you're in a position to do so, you would help someone else in similar circumstances, not paying me back, but paying it forward?" Maya stared at him in astonishment. "Mr. Walter, that's incredibly generous, but I couldn't accept that kind of help from you. You're living on a fixed income yourself." Walter smiled mysteriously. "My dear, I think you might be surprised about my financial situation. Let me just say that the cost of a car repair would not be a hardship for me, and seeing you and Zara struggling when I have the means to help would be much more difficult to bear than the expense." The conversation that followed revealed more about Walter's true circumstances than he had shared in months of friendship. While he remained vague about specifics, he admitted that his retirement had left him far more financially secure than he had initially implied. He had been living modestly by choice, he explained, not necessity. "After my wife died and my son cut ties with me, I became obsessed with accumulating wealth as a way of proving my worth," Walter said. "But money without family to share it with is just numbers on a bank statement. I've spent the last few years trying to figure out how to find meaning in the fortune I built instead of the family I lost." Maya was overwhelmed by Walter's offer and his apparent wealth, but also confused by the contradictions. If Walter was as financially secure as he suggested, why was he spending his days alone in a neighborhood diner instead of living the lifestyle his resources could afford? "I don't understand," she said honestly. "If you have money, why are you here? Why aren't you traveling or living in a nice house or doing all the things that wealthy retirees usually do?" Walter's answer surprised her with its honesty. "Because those things don't fill the emptiness left by losing your family," he said simply. "I tried the luxury lifestyle for a while after I retired. Big house, expensive cars, exclusive clubs. But it all felt hollow when I had no one to share it with. The only time I feel truly alive anymore is when I'm here with you and Zara, feeling like I have a family again." The vulnerability in Walter's voice brought tears to Maya's eyes. She began to understand that their friendship filled a need for Walter that went far beyond simple companionship. In her and Zara, he had found a way to experience the family life he had lost through his own mistakes. Despite her discomfort with accepting such significant help, Maya finally agreed to let Walter pay for her car repairs after he pointed out that her ability to work benefited Zara, and that he couldn't bear to see a child suffer when he had the means to prevent it. The next morning, Walter accompanied Maya to the garage where her car was being held. When the mechanic quoted the repair cost at $1,800, Maya watched in amazement as Walter pulled out a business checkbook and wrote the amount without hesitation. "Mr. Pemberton," the mechanic said, reading the name on the check. "Any relation to the Pemberton who founded Pemberton Technologies?" Maya saw Walter stiffen almost imperceptibly. "No," he said quickly. "Common name." But Maya caught the mechanic's confused look and the way Walter hurried her out of the garage immediately after completing the transaction. The brief exchange planted a seed of suspicion that would grow over the following days. That evening, while Walter was helping Zara with a science project about computer programming, Maya discreetly Googled Pemberton Technologies on her phone. What she found made her heart race with shock and disbelief. Pemberton Technologies was one of the largest software companies in the world, founded in the 1980s by entrepreneur Walter Pemberton and sold to a tech giant for over $40 billion just 3 years ago. The company had been responsible for developing some of the most widely used business software in the world, and its founder had been listed among the wealthiest individuals in America for over 2 decades. Maya stared at the screen, trying to reconcile the Walter she knew with the powerful business mogul smiling from corporate headshots that were clearly recent. According to the articles she found, Walter Pemberton had indeed retired after selling his company, but he had hardly disappeared into obscurity. He still sat on several corporate boards and was considered one of the most influential figures in the technology industry. More shocking still was learning that Walter Pemberton currently worth an estimated $15 billion, making him one of the richest men in the country. The modest retiree eating meatloaf in their neighborhood diner was actually one of America's most successful entrepreneurs. As Maya processed this information, pieces of previous conversations began to make sense. Walter's extensive knowledge of technology, his refined mannerisms, his expensive watch, his ability to write an $1,800 check without hesitation, all of it pointed to the truth that had been hiding in plain sight. But this revelation raised more questions than it answered. Why was one of the richest men in America spending his time in a working-class diner, forming deep friendships with a single mother and her daughter? What was Walter really looking for in their relationship? And had Maya unknowingly become involved in something much more complex than a simple friendship? Most disturbing of all was the realization that Walter had been lying to her for months about his identity and circumstances. While Maya could understand his desire for privacy, the depth of his deception made her question everything she thought she knew about their relationship. That night, as Maya lay awake processing her discovery, she found herself torn between gratitude for Walter's kindness and betrayal at his dishonesty. She had opened her heart and home to this man, had allowed him to become a father figure to her daughter, and all the while he had been living a lie. Maya decided she needed to confront Walter about his true identity, but she wanted to understand his motivations before deciding how to handle the situation. The Walter she had come to care about was real, regardless of his wealth and status, but the lies he had told cast doubt on everything else about their relationship. The next day, Maya watched Walter carefully as he went. The conversation Maya had been dreading came sooner than she expected. After Zara left for her piano lesson that Thursday afternoon, Maya found herself alone with Walter in the nearly empty diner. The weight of her discovery pressed down on her as she refilled his coffee cup and tried to find the courage to confront him about his true identity. Walter sensed the change in her demeanor immediately. Maya's usual warm chattiness had been replaced by a careful politeness that felt like a wall between them. When she finally slid into the booth across from him, her expression was serious and determined. "Walter," she began carefully, "we need to talk about who you really are." The color drained from Walter's face, and his hand trembled slightly as he set down his coffee cup. "I'm not sure what you mean," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Maya pulled out her phone and showed him the screen displaying a recent article about Pemberton Technologies. Walter's own face smiled back at them from a corporate headshot accompanying a story about his philanthropic donations to education initiatives. Walter Pemberton, founder and former CEO of Pemberton Technologies, estimated net worth $15 billion, Maya read aloud. One of the most successful entrepreneurs of his generation, currently sits on the boards of 6 major corporations, and is known for his private nature despite his public success. Walter closed his eyes and leaned back in the booth, looking suddenly much older and more fragile than Maya had ever seen him. When he opened his eyes, they were filled with a mixture of shame and fear. "I suppose you hate me now," he said quietly. "I wouldn't blame you if you did. I've been lying to you from the moment we met." Maya studied his face, seeing past the deception to the genuine vulnerability underneath. "I don't hate you, Walter. But I am confused and hurt. Why did you lie to me? Did you think I would treat you differently if I knew who you really were?" "Of course you would have," Walter said immediately. "Everyone does. They either want something from me or they treat me like some kind of celebrity instead of just a person. When I walked into this diner that first day and you just saw a lonely old man who needed coffee and kindness, it was the first genuine human interaction I'd had in years." He ran his hands through his gray hair, looking exhausted. "Do you have any idea what it's like to wonder if every person who talks to you is calculating how they can benefit from your wealth? To question whether every smile, every invitation, every friendship is authentic or just an investment strategy?" Maya felt her anger beginning to soften as she heard the pain in Walter's voice. "But we're friends, Walter. Real friends. I would never have tried to take advantage of you. I know that now, Walter said earnestly. That's exactly why I couldn't bear to tell you the truth. You and Zara became the most precious thing in my life precisely because you didn't know who I was. You cared about Walter the lonely old man, not Walter the billionaire. I was terrified that learning about my money would change everything between us. Maya sat quietly for a moment, processing Walter's explanation. Part of her understood his reasoning, but she still felt betrayed by the depth of his deception. How much of what you've told me is true? She asked. Do you really live in that small apartment? Are you actually retired? Was any of it real? Walter looked ashamed. The apartment is real, though I also own houses in several other cities that I rarely use anymore. The retirement is real too, though I do still serve on some boards and oversee my foundation work. And everything I told you about my wife and son is absolutely true. That pain, that regret, that loneliness, all of that is completely real. Tell me about your son, Maya said. I know from the articles that his name was Michael and that he changed it after your wife died. But I want to hear it from you. Walter's face crumpled with grief. Michael Pemberton became Michael Zhang when he turned 18, taking his mother's maiden name. He blamed me for her death, and he wasn't wrong. I was so consumed with building the company that I missed all the signs of her illness until it was too late. Even when we knew she was dying, I kept thinking I could somehow balance everything, be there for her, and still run the business. He paused, his voice growing thick with emotion. The last time I saw Michael was at Catherine's funeral. He was 22, about to graduate from Stanford with a degree in environmental engineering. He told me that day that he never wanted to see me again, that he was going to build a life that had nothing to do with Walter Pemberton or Pemberton Technologies. And he succeeded, Walter continued. I've kept track of him from a distance, even though he doesn't know it. He founded a company called Zhang Environmental Solutions that develops clean energy technology for developing countries. He's married to a wonderful woman named Sarah, and they have 2 children, my grandchildren that I've never met. Maya's heart ached as she listened to Walter's story. Have you ever tried to contact him directly? Many times over the years, Walter admitted. I've written letters that I never sent, hired investigators to find current contact information, even attended some of his company's public presentations from the back of the room. But what right do I have to disrupt his life after everything I put him through? He's built something meaningful and good, completely independent of my influence or money. Maybe the greatest gift I can give him is to stay away. As Maya absorbed this information, she began to understand the full scope of Walter's isolation. Despite his enormous wealth and public success, he was essentially alone in the world, cut off from the only family that mattered to him by his own past mistakes. That's why our friendship means so much to me, Walter said softly. For the first time in decades, I have people who care about me for who I am, not what I've accomplished or how much money I have. You and Zara have given me a taste of what family feels like again. Maya reached across the table and took Walter's hand in both of hers. Walter, I need you to understand something. Your money doesn't change how I feel about you as a person, but the lies do hurt. If we're going to continue being friends, there can't be any more deception between us. Relief flooded Walter's face. You still want to be friends? Of course I do, Maya said, squeezing his hand. But I need complete honesty from now on. No more stories about living on a modest retirement income or pretending to be someone you're not. I want to know the real Walter Pemberton, all of him. Walter nodded eagerly. I promise, no more lies. Ask me anything you want to know. Over the next 2 hours, Walter shared more about his real life than he had with anyone in years. He told Maya about the loneliness of enormous wealth, the isolation that came with constant public scrutiny, and the way money had gradually separated him from normal human experiences. He described his daily routine of waking up in his small apartment, deliberately choosing to live simply despite having resources that could buy almost anything. He explained that the modest lifestyle wasn't just about anonymity, but about trying to reconnect with the person he had been before wealth and power had consumed him. I have more money than I could spend in several lifetimes, Walter said. But what I don't have is someone to share a simple meal with who actually enjoys my company. What I don't have is a child who gets excited to see me walk through the door. The fact that he's never reached out tells me that he's made peace with our estrangement in his own way. Maybe he's been waiting for you to make the first move, Maya suggested. Maybe he's as stubborn as his father and doesn't want to be the one to give in first. Walter laughed sadly. You may be right. Catherine always said that Michael and I were exactly alike in all the worst ways. Proud, stubborn, convinced that we're always right. Perhaps we're both sitting in our respective corners waiting for the other to blink first. As their conversation continued, Maya learned more about the scope of Walter's business empire and philanthropic activities. Even in retirement, he was involved in funding educational programs, environmental initiatives, and technology development projects around the world. His wealth continued to grow even as he gave away millions annually to various causes. The irony, Walter said, is that I've probably done more good for the world with my money since retiring than I ever did while building the company. But none of it feels as meaningful as helping you fix your car or watching Zara understand a math concept. Personal connection, human relationships, that's what actually matters. When Zara returned from her piano lesson, she immediately sensed the charged atmosphere in the diner. Maya and Walter were sitting closer together than usual, and there was an emotional intensity in their conversation that made her curious. What were you guys talking about? Zara asked with 8-year-old directness as she slid into the booth beside Maya. Maya and Walter exchanged glances, and Maya realized that this moment represented a test of Walter's commitment to honesty. Would he continue the deception with Zara, or was he truly ready to be authentic about who he was? Actually, sweetheart, Walter said carefully, your mother and I were talking about some things I should have been honest about from the beginning. It turns out that my life is a bit more complicated than I've let on. Zara looked back and forth between them with the intuitive understanding that children often possess about adult emotional undercurrents. Are you in trouble, Mr. Walter? Is that why you seem scared? Walter smiled at her perceptiveness. I'm not in trouble exactly, but I haven't been completely truthful about who I am. Your mother discovered that I used to run a big company and that I have more money than I initially told you about. How much more money? Zara asked with characteristic bluntness. Walter looked to Maya for guidance, and she nodded encouragingly. A lot more, sweetheart. More than most people have. Zara processed this information with the practical acceptance that children often show for adult complexities. Does that mean you don't really need to worry about paying for your food here? That's right, Walter said, smiling at her logic. And does it mean you could help other people who need money for important things? Yes, it does. Zara nodded thoughtfully. Then, why were you pretending to be poor? That seems silly. Walter and Maya burst into laughter at Zara's straightforward assessment of the situation. From a child's perspective, Walter's elaborate deception did seem unnecessarily complicated. You're absolutely right, Zara, Walter said. It was silly of me. I was afraid that if you and your mother knew I had a lot of money, you might treat me differently or not want to be my friends anymore. Zara looked genuinely puzzled by this concept. Why would having money make us not like you? You're still the same person who helps me with homework and tells funny stories about when you were young. Walter felt tears prick his eyes at Zara's simple wisdom. You know what? You're absolutely right. I should have trusted that you and your mother were good enough people to like me for who I am, not what I have. As the evening progressed, Maya found herself looking at Walter with new eyes. The revelation of his wealth had initially been shocking and disorienting, but as they talked through the implications, she realized that it didn't fundamentally change who he was as a person. The lonely old man who had walked into the diner months ago was still there, still vulnerable and kind and genuine in his affection for her and Zara. What had changed was Maya's understanding of the choices Walter had made in building their friendship. Every simple meal he had shared with them, every modest tip he had left, every moment of genuine connection had been a conscious decision to live as an ordinary person rather than a billionaire. In some ways, that made his friendship even more meaningful. I have one more question, Maya said as they prepared to close up the diner for the evening. What happens now? Do you go back to your real life? Or do you keep coming here for meatloaf and friendship? Walter's answer came without hesitation. If the revelation of Walter's true identity marked a turning point in their relationship, but not in the way Maya had initially feared. Instead of creating distance between them, the honesty seemed to deepen their bond. Walter was visibly relieved to no longer carry the burden of deception, and Maya found herself appreciating the trust he had finally shown by revealing his authentic self. In the weeks following their conversation, Walter began to share more details about his current life that he had previously kept hidden. He told Maya about his penthouse office in downtown that he visited twice a week for board meetings, his small staff that managed his various business interests and philanthropic activities, and the strange isolation of being surrounded by people who worked for him but weren't truly friends. The hardest part about wealth, Walter explained one afternoon as he helped Zara with a particularly challenging geometry problem, isn't managing the money itself. It's the way it changes every relationship you have. People either want something from you, or they're so intimidated by what you represent that they can't relate to you as a human being. Maya was beginning to understand why Walter's friendship with them was so precious to him. In their diner booth, away from the corporate world that defined his public identity, Walter could simply be a grandfather figure to Zara and a friend to Maya. The simplicity of that relationship was a refuge from the complex dynamics that surrounded him everywhere else. As December approached, Walter seemed to grow more melancholy. Maya noticed that he was checking his phone more frequently and seemed distracted during their conversations. When she asked if everything was all right, Walter admitted that the holiday season always brought his grief about his estranged son into sharper focus. Christmas was Catherine's favorite holiday, Walter said sadly. She would spend weeks decorating the house and planning elaborate celebrations. Michael loved it too, especially when he was young. Some of my happiest memories are of Christmas morning when Michael was a child, before work consumed my life and everything fell apart. Maya learned that Walter typically spent the holidays alone, declining invitations to society parties and charity events in favor of quiet solitude in his apartment. The thought of Walter sitting alone during Christmas while she and Zara celebrated together made Maya's heart ache. "Why don't you spend Christmas Eve with us?" Maya suggested impulsively. "It won't be fancy, just dinner at my apartment and some simple gifts under a small tree. But you're family to us now, and family shouldn't be alone during the holidays." Walter's eyes filled with tears at her invitation. "Are you sure? I wouldn't want to impose on your traditions." "You're not imposing," Maya assured him. "You're accepting an invitation from people who care about you. There's a difference." Zara was thrilled when Maya told her that Walter would be joining them for Christmas Eve. She immediately began planning special activities and insisting that Maya help her find the perfect gift for their friend. The child's excitement was infectious, and Maya found herself looking forward to their Christmas celebration more than she had in years. It was while shopping for Christmas gifts that Maya encountered the first real complication of Walter's secret identity. She had taken Zara to a large electronics store to look for educational computer programs that Walter had mentioned might help with Zara's advanced math interests. While there, Zara spotted a large display featuring tablets loaded with educational software. "Mama," Zara said excitedly, "look. These tablets have the learning programs that Mr. Walter was telling me about. Can we get one for me for Christmas?" Maya looked at the price tag and felt her heart sink. The tablet cost more than she made in 2 weeks at the diner. "Sweetie, that's too expensive for our Christmas budget this year. Maybe we can ask Santa for it next year when Mama has saved up more money." But Zara had already moved on to examining the educational software, her bright mind immediately grasping how the programs could accelerate her learning. It's hard sometimes, knowing your child has so much potential and not being able to give her all the tools she could use. Walter listened thoughtfully, then asked carefully, "Would you be offended if I wanted to get Zara that tablet for Christmas? As a gift from a friend who cares about her education?" Maya felt a familiar tension arise between gratitude and pride. "Walter, I appreciate the thought, but that's too expensive a gift. I can't let you spend that kind of money on us." "Maya," Walter said gently, "I understand your independence, and I respect it enormously. But consider this. I have more money than I could spend in several lifetimes, and I have no family to spend it on. Zara is a brilliant child who deserves every educational opportunity. Would denying her those opportunities really be better than accepting help from someone who loves her like a grandfather?" The comparison to a grandfather struck Maya deeply. Walter had indeed become like family to them, and his desire to support Zara's education came from genuine affection rather than condescending charity. "If you insist on buying her the tablet," Maya said finally, Then, I insist on one condition. You have to let me pay you back somehow, even if it takes years. I don't want Zara to learn that expensive gifts just appear without sacrifice or effort. Walter smiled at her compromise. Agreed, but I get to set the terms of repayment. You can pay me back by continuing to be the wonderful mother and friend you already are. That's more valuable to me than any amount of money. Christmas Eve arrived with an unexpected snowfall that transformed the city into a winter wonderland. Maya spent the day preparing a simple but special dinner while Zara decorated their small apartment with handmade ornaments and construction paper snowflakes. The modest space felt warm and festive, filled with the kind of genuine holiday spirit that money couldn't buy. Walter arrived at 6 o'clock carrying several wrapped packages and wearing an expression of nervous excitement that Maya had never seen before. He was dressed more casually than usual, in a soft sweater and slacks that made him look younger and more relaxed. "Welcome to our Christmas celebration," Maya said, giving him a warm hug. "I hope you're hungry for pot roast and all the fixings." "I can't remember the last time I was this excited about Christmas," Walter admitted as Zara dragged him over to see their tree. "Thank you for including me in your family celebration." Dinner was a joyful affair filled with laughter, stories, and the kind of easy conversation that had become natural between them. Walter entertained Zara with tales of Christmas traditions from his own childhood, while Maya shared memories of holidays with her grandmother, who had raised her after her parents died in a car accident when she was young. "Your grandmother sounds like she was a wonderful woman," Walter said after Maya described the elaborate Christmas cookies her grandmother used to bake despite their limited income. Zara is lucky to have inherited that tradition of making holidays special regardless of circumstances. After dinner, they gathered around the small tree to exchange gifts. Zara had made Walter a handwritten book of math puzzles and word games, complete with illustrations and a dedication that read to Mr. Walter, the best teacher and friend ever. Walter was visibly moved by the thoughtful gift, holding the little book as if it were made of precious metal. Maya's gift to Walter was a framed photograph of the three of them taken at the diner by Mrs. Rodriguez the previous week. In the picture, they were laughing at one of Zara's jokes, looking for all the world like a happy family. Walter stared at the photograph for a long moment before carefully placing it in a position of honor on Maya's mantle. "This is the most meaningful gift I've received in decades," he said quietly. "Thank you for giving me a family portrait." When it was Walter's turn to give gifts, he started with Maya. He handed her an elegantly wrapped box that contained a beautiful cashmere scarf in deep blue, along with a card that read, "For keeping me warm with your friendship." Zara's gift was the educational tablet they had seen at the store, but Walter had taken the extra step of having it professionally programmed with advanced mathematics and science programs appropriate for her age and interests. Zara's squeals of delight filled the apartment as she immediately began exploring the device's capabilities. But Walter's final gift was the most surprising of all. He handed Maya an official-looking envelope with a serious expression. "This isn't exactly a Christmas gift," he said carefully. "It's more of a proposition that I hope you'll consider." Inside the envelope was a letter offering Maya a position as Director of Community Outreach for the Walter Pemberton Foundation, with a salary that was 3 times what she made at the diner and full benefits including health insurance and a college fund for Zara. Maya stared at the letter in shock. "Walter, I don't understand. What is this?" "It's a job offer," Walter said. "I've been thinking about this for weeks. You have an incredible gift for connecting with people and making them feel valued. You've built a life for yourself and Zara despite enormous challenges, and you understand what it's like to struggle with real problems. Those are exactly the qualities I need in someone who would help me distribute my charitable donations more effectively." Maya's mind raced as she processed the implications. "But I don't have experience with foundation work or nonprofit management. I'm just a waitress." "You're not just anything," Walter said firmly. "You're one of the smartest, most compassionate people I've ever met. The technical aspects of foundation work can be taught, but the qualities that make someone effective at helping others can't be learned from books. You already have those qualities." As Maya struggled to absorb this unexpected opportunity, Walter explained his vision for expanding his foundation's work. Instead of simply writing checks to established charities, he wanted to create programs that would identify and support individuals and families who were working to improve their circumstances but needed assistance to achieve their goals. "I want to find people like you," Walter said. "People who are intelligent and hardworking but lack resources or opportunities. People who would use help as a stepping stone rather than a crutch. You would be perfect for identifying those individuals and developing programs to support them." Zara looked up from her new tablet with the practical wisdom that children often display. "Mama, does this mean Mr. Walter wants to pay you to help other people the way he helped us?" "That's exactly what it means, sweetheart," Walter said, smiling at Zara's understanding. Maya felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what Walter was offering. The salary alone would transform their lives, providing security and opportunities she had never dreamed possible. But more than that, the job would allow her to help others in the same way Walter had helped them. "I need time to think about this," Maya said finally. "It's an incredible opportunity, but it would mean leaving the diner and Mrs. Rodriguez and starting a completely different career. That's a big change for both me and Zara." "Of course," Walter said. "Take all the time you need. The offer will remain open regardless of how long you need to decide." As the evening wound down and they sat around the tree, sipping hot chocolate, Maya found herself looking at Walter with new appreciation for the complexity of his character. Here was a man who could buy anything he wanted, yet he had found his greatest joy in the simple pleasure of family friendship. He had used his wealth not to impress them, but to improve their lives in meaningful ways. "Can I ask you something?" Maya said as Zara dozed against Walter's shoulder. "Why is it so important to you to help us? I mean, you could support hundreds of families with your resources. What makes us special?" Maya spent the week between Christmas and New Year's carefully considering Walter's job offer. She discussed it with Mrs. Rodriguez, who was both saddened at the thought of losing Maya but thrilled about the opportunity her friend was being given. She researched foundation work online and even spoke with a career counselor at the local community college about making such a dramatic career transition. But, mostly, Maya found herself thinking about the potential impact of Walter's proposal. Working with his foundation wouldn't just change her life, it would position her to change other lives as well. The idea of helping families in situations similar to her own was deeply appealing, but it also felt like an enormous responsibility. On New Year's Eve, Maya made her decision. She asked Walter to meet her at the diner after closing time, when they could talk privately without interruption. Walter arrived promptly at 9 o'clock, looking nervous and hopeful. "I've decided to accept your offer," Maya said without preamble. "But I have some conditions." Walter's face lit up with relief and excitement. "Anything you want. Name your conditions." "First," Maya said, "I want to start part-time while I learn the foundation business. I don't want to leave Mrs. Rodriguez completely stranded at the diner until she can find and train a replacement. Second, I want Zara to understand that this opportunity comes with responsibilities. I plan to involve her in age-appropriate volunteer work, so she learns that privilege should be used to help others." Walter nodded enthusiastically at both conditions. "Those are excellent terms. What else?" "Third," Maya continued, "I want complete transparency about the foundation's finances and decision-making processes. If I'm going to represent your charitable work, I need to understand everything about how it operates. And finally, I want you to promise me that you'll use this new role of mine as an opportunity to reconsider reaching out to your son." Walter looked puzzled by the last condition. "I don't understand the connection." Maya leaned forward, her expression earnest. "Walter, you're about to embark on a new phase of your philanthropic work, one focused on healing and helping families. Don't you think it's time to apply some of that same energy to healing your own family? You've learned so much about forgiveness and second chances through our friendship. Maybe it's time to give your son the same opportunity for reconciliation that you found with us." Walter was quiet for a long moment, considering Maya's words. What if he rejects my attempts to reconnect? What if reaching out only causes him more pain or disrupts the life he's built? "Then, at least you'll know you tried," Maya said gently. "And maybe, just maybe, he's been waiting for you to make the first move all these years. You'll never know if you don't try." That conversation proved to be prophetic in ways neither Maya nor Walter could have anticipated. 2 weeks later, as Maya was learning the ropes of foundation management and beginning to develop programs for supporting struggling families. Walter's assistant received an unexpected phone call. The caller identified himself as Michael Zhang and said he was trying to reach Walter Pemberton regarding a potential collaboration between Zhang Environmental Solutions and the Pemberton Foundation. Walter's assistant, unaware of the personal connection, scheduled the call as a routine business meeting. Walter was in his downtown office reviewing grant proposals when his assistant buzzed him about the scheduled call with Mr. Zhang. The name didn't immediately register, and Walter almost asked to reschedule the meeting to focus on Maya's foundation work. It was only when his assistant mentioned that Zhang Environmental Solutions specialized in clean energy technology for developing countries that Walter realized who was calling. His hands trembled as he picked up the phone. After 23 years of silence, his son was reaching out voluntarily. "This is Walter Pemberton," he said, his voice carefully controlled despite the emotion surging through him. "Hello, Father." The simple word hit Walter like a physical blow. He had imagined this moment thousands of times over the years, but hearing Michael's voice as an adult was both wonderful and heartbreaking. His son sounded confident and mature, with the same slight rasp that Walter remembered from Michael's childhood. "Michael," Walter said, and then found himself unable to continue. 23 years of regret, longing, and grief couldn't be compressed into a simple greeting. "I know this call is unexpected," Michael said, his tone carefully professional. "I'm calling because I've been following the expansion of your foundation work, particularly the new community outreach programs. I think there might be opportunities for collaboration between our organizations." Walter realized that Michael was maintaining emotional distance by framing their conversation in business terms, and he decided to respect that approach while the doors of communication were still open. "I'd be very interested in exploring potential partnerships," Walter said. "Your company's work with sustainable technology for developing communities aligns perfectly with our foundation's mission." As they discussed their respective organizations, Walter learned that Michael had built Zhang Environmental Solutions into one of the most respected clean energy companies in the country. His son had developed innovative solar and water purification technologies that had brought electricity and clean water to remote villages around the world. "I have to admit," Michael said during a pause in their business discussion, "I was surprised to learn about the foundation's new direction. The community outreach programs sound quite different from your previous philanthropic approach." Walter saw an opening to share something personal without overwhelming his son. "I've had some excellent advisors recently who helped me understand that effective charity requires personal connection and real understanding of people's struggles. I've learned that writing checks isn't enough if you want to make meaningful change." "That sounds like wisdom that came from experience rather than books," Michael observed. "It did," Walter said. "I've been fortunate to develop some relationships that taught me what really matters in life. I only wish I had learned those lessons sooner." The conversation continued for nearly an hour, with both men carefully navigating the boundary between business discussion and personal revelation. By the end of the call, they had tentatively agreed to arrange a meeting between their teams to explore potential collaborative projects. After Michael hung up, Walter sat in his office for a long time, processing the magnitude of what had just happened. His son had reached out, had spoken to him with civility if not warmth, and had opened a door to possible future contact. It wasn't the dramatic reconciliation Walter had sometimes imagined, but it was a beginning. That evening, Walter shared the news with Maya and Zara during their regular dinner at the diner. Zara, with her characteristic directness, immediately grasped the significance of the development. "Does this mean you might get to see your son again?" she asked excitedly. "And maybe meet your grandchildren?" "It might," Walter said cautiously. "It's too early to know what will develop from this, but for the first time in decades, we're talking again. That's more than I dared to hope for." Maya squeezed Walter's hand across the table. "I'm so proud of you for being open to this possibility. Whatever happens, you're handling it with grace and patience." Over the following weeks, the business relationship between Walter and Michael's organizations provided a framework for gradual personal reconnection. They exchanged emails about potential projects, had several phone conferences with their respective teams, and slowly began to incorporate more personal elements into their professional communications. Michael mentioned his wife Sarah and their children Emma and David in passing during business calls. Walter shared carefully chosen stories about his foundation work and the people who had influenced his new approach to philanthropy. Neither man rushed the process, but both seemed to understand that they were rebuilding a relationship that had been broken for over 2 decades. The breakthrough came when Michael's company needed emergency funding for a clean water project in Central America after their primary donor unexpectedly withdrew support. Walter's foundation was able to step in with the necessary resources, and Michael called personally to express his gratitude. "Thank you," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. "This project will bring clean water to 12 villages. You've literally saved lives with this funding. I'm honored to support your work," Walter replied. "What you've built with your company is extraordinary, Michael. Your mother would be so proud of what you've accomplished." There was a long pause before Michael responded. "Do you really think so?" "I know so," Walter said firmly. "Catherine always said you were going to change the world, and you have. You've done everything she believed you could do, and more." It was the first time they had spoken directly about Catherine since her death, and the mention of her seemed to break down some of the emotional barriers that had existed between them. "I think about her every day," Michael said quietly, "especially when I'm working on these projects. I always wondered if she would approve of the path I chose." "She would be proud beyond words," Walter assured him. "And, Michael, I want you to know that I'm proud of you too. You became the man you are despite my failures as a father, and that speaks to your strength and her influence." After that conversation, their relationship began to evolve more rapidly. Michael shared photos of his children and stories about his work in the field. Walter told him about Maya and Zara, describing how their friendship had taught him what family really meant. 3 months after that first phone call, Michael suggested they meet in person to tour one of his company's domestic projects together. Walter agreed immediately, though he was nervous about seeing his son face-to-face after so many years. They met at a wind farm in rural Iowa, where Michael's company was installing next-generation turbines for a farming cooperative. Walter was shocked at how much his son resembled Catherine, with her gentle eyes and determined chin. Michael was equally surprised to find his father looking older, but somehow more at peace than he remembered. Their first few hours together were awkward, filled with careful conversation and long silences. But as Michael showed Walter around the wind farm and explained the technology and community impact of the project, both men began to relax into a more natural interaction. "This is remarkable work, Michael," Walter said as they watched the massive turbines turning gracefully in the prairie wind. "You're providing sustainable energy and economic stability to farming communities. It's exactly the kind of meaningful impact I wish I had focused on during my career." "You can focus on it now," Michael said. "Your foundation has resources and reach that my company could never achieve alone. Together, we could scale these projects to help communities all over the world." That conversation marked the beginning of a true partnership between father and son, both professional and personal. Over the following months, they worked together on increasingly ambitious projects, combining Walter's financial resources with Michael's technical expertise and community connections. More importantly, they began to heal their personal relationship. Michael introduced Walter to his wife Sarah and their children, who quickly embraced their newfound grandfather with enthusiasm. Walter shared stories about Maya and Zara, explaining how their friendship had taught him to value human connection over material success. On a warm spring day, exactly 1 year after Maya had first confronted Walter about his true identity, the extended family gathered for a special celebration. Maya had officially taken over as full-time director of the Pemberton Foundation, and Michael's company had just announced a major partnership that would bring clean energy to 50 rural communities across 3 countries. The celebration took place not in some fancy restaurant or exclusive club, but in the familiar surroundings of Rosie's Diner, where it all began. Mrs. Rodriguez had closed the restaurant early to accommodate the private party, and the same red vinyl booths that had witnessed Walter's lonely meals now hosted a joyful family reunion. Walter sat surrounded by the people who had become most important to him, Maya and Zara, who had given him hope and taught him about unconditional love, Michael, Sarah, Emma, and David, who had given him a second chance at being a father and grandfather, and Mrs. Rodriguez, who had provided the warm, welcoming space where healing could begin. As the evening progressed, and the conversation flowed easily between generations, Walter reflected on the strange journey that had brought them all together. He had walked into this diner a year ago as one of the loneliest men in America, despite his enormous wealth and public success. He was ending this chapter of his life surrounded by love, laughter, and the kind of meaningful relationships that money could never buy. Maya, now confident in her role as foundation director, was developing programs that had already helped dozens of families achieve stability and independence. Zara was thriving academically and had become a bridge between Walter's different family connections. Equally comfortable with Walter, was quiet for a long moment, gently stroking Zara's hair as she slept. "You gave me something I thought I had lost forever," he said finally. "You gave me the chance to feel like a father and grandfather again. Every moment I spend with you and Zara helps heal a part of my heart that I thought was permanently broken." He paused, his voice growing soft with emotion. "But beyond that, you represent something I believe in. You're proof that good people can overcome difficult circumstances when they're given opportunities and support. If I can help you achieve your potential, maybe I can find a way to help others do the same. Maybe that's how I can make peace with all the mistakes I made with my own family." As Maya carried Zara to bed and tucked her in with her new tablet nearby, she reflected on how dramatically her life had changed since that first day when Walter walked into the diner. What had started as simple kindness to a lonely stranger had evolved into something that would reshape her and her daughter's future. Looking back at Walter, who was still sitting by their Christmas tree studying the photograph she had given him, Maya realized that healing could happen at any age. Walter's money had given him many things, but it was their friendship that had given him hope for redemption. And now he was offering her the chance to help extend that redemption to others. It was, Maya thought, the most meaningful Christmas gift anyone had ever given her. "Vimy, I want to keep coming here. This is my real life now, Maya. The board meetings and business obligations are just things I do to fill time. But this, sitting in this booth with you and Zara, feeling like I have a family again, this is what makes me feel alive." Maya smiled, feeling the last of her anger and hurt dissolve into understanding and renewed affection. "Then, we'll see you Tuesday at 2:30, just like always." "Just like always," Walter agreed, his face radiant with relief and gratitude. As Maya walked home with Zara that evening, she reflected on the strange turn their lives had taken. 6 months ago, she had been just another struggling single mother serving coffee to strangers. Now she found herself the trusted friend of one of the richest men in America, someone who had chosen their modest friendship over all the luxuries his wealth could provide. It was a reminder that human connection could transcend any barrier, economic, social, or otherwise. Walter's billions might have insulated him from financial worry, but they couldn't protect him from the universal human need for love, acceptance, and belonging. In finding that with Maya and Zara, he had discovered something more valuable than any amount of money could buy. Through his usual routine at the diner, he seemed genuinely happy to see them, authentically interested in Zara's schoolwork, and completely comfortable in the modest surroundings. If this was all an elaborate performance, it was remarkably convincing. As the afternoon progressed, Maya made her decision. She would give Walter one opportunity to tell her the truth about who he really was. Depending on his response, she would decide whether their friendship could survive the foundation of lies on which it had been built. Walter sensed something different in Maya's demeanor that day, though he couldn't quite identify what had changed. There was a watchfulness in her eyes and a tension in her manner that hadn't been there before. When she asked if they could speak privately after Zara left for her piano lesson, Walter knew that something significant had shifted in their relationship. What Walter didn't know was that Maya had spent the night researching not only his professional accomplishments, but also his personal history. She had learned about his late wife Catherine, his estranged son Michael, and the tragic family dynamic that had driven his son to legally change his name and disappear from Walter's life. She had also discovered that Walter's son Michael had indeed gone on to achieve remarkable success under his new identity, though in a completely different industry from his father's technology empire. The irony was that both father and son had become prominent figures in American business. But their estrangement was so complete that they had never reconnected despite their mutual success. As Maya prepared for what she knew would be a difficult conversation, she realized that Walter's wealth and status were less important to her than understanding why he had felt the need to hide his true identity from people who had offered him genuine friendship and acceptance. To realize that I had lost the only thing that truly mattered. By then, the trail had gone completely cold. I hired private investigators, but Michael had been very thorough about creating a new identity. And, to be honest, part of me felt I didn't deserve to find him after what I had put him through. Maya reached across the table and covered Walter's weathered hand with her own. "It's never too late to try to make amends," she said. "If you could find him, what would you say?" "That I was wrong about everything," Walter said immediately. "That I'm sorry for choosing money and power over love and family. That I would give up everything I ever achieved just to have one more conversation with him. To tell him how proud I am of the man he became despite having such a failure for a father." The emotion in Walter's voice was raw and honest, and Maya felt her heart break for this lonely old man who had everything except the one thing that mattered most. As the afternoon wore on, Maya found herself thinking about Walter's story long after he had left the diner. She couldn't shake the image of a 16-year-old boy arranging his mother's funeral alone, or the decades of regret that had led Walter to this small neighborhood diner, grateful for the simple kindness of strangers who had become his only family. That night, as she tucked Zara into bed, Maya held her daughter a little tighter and made a silent promise to herself that she would never let work or any other ambition come between her and the precious gift of her child's love and trust.